your brain kind of like scares me sometimes because I was like with him. I was like, it took offense. It was offended.
I saw that part too. But
and you're sitting there going like, no offense. Like
I was looking for the joke. I know. I was going both directions. I'm on top of it. Don't forget Gimli, right? Is that his name?
Oh, yeah. You might want to. I'll let you have that one then.
I don't know anything about the guy.
Oh, okay.
He just has an axe.
The little short, the dwarf. He's a dwarf,
Yes,
right?
the dwarf.
Yeah. Gimli's the dwarf. For those listening, welcome to the NerdBrand Podcast. I'm your host, Jason. This is Mitch. This is John.
Hello.
And so today we're talking about You're the Hero, and we are Gandalf. So, yeah, you know.
Getting a little nerdy.
I shouldn't have shaved.
Yeah. This episode is a little like trying to get back into the nerdy thing a little bit for us because it is called NerdBrand Podcast, and we've stepped away from it because lots of things have happened last year, and yeah, you know, you just kind of have to roll with it, and you know, whatever comes up, that's what you do. That's what you talk about. That's what people want to hear. So, but this one here, we get to do what we want.
Finally. We've been doing what you people want for so long.
So yes, use the name Gandalf. So this is sort of a Lord of the Rings type of podcast, but it does have a reason for it.
It's a metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely. There are two guides to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. There's Gandalf the Grey, who is guiding Legolas and Aragorn, and then you have Gollum, who is guiding Frodo Baggins and Samwise.
Poor souls.
You're right. So, you know, when you think about there's this Joseph, I'm going to drop the ball on the name of that again. Campbell, thank you. The Hero's Journey. It has a lot of steps to it. Like you could basically put Star Wars on there and kind of watch that. You know, you can put this on here with Frodo Baggins or Bilbo. You can do that. So it's sort of kind of comes out of that. In fact, there's an example of this Hero's Journey that actually uses Lord of the Rings with Gandalf and all that. So, but kind of wanted to talk about like, why is it important to keep the customer as the hero in the journey and not the vendor or agency or consultant or whatever? What do you guys think? You think how important on, say, one scale 1 to 10, how important is it to keep that view?
42.
Up there.
It's a pretty important thing.
Yeah. You know, you are in marketing, so you kind of know, like, as you see, like, there's a large part of that journey. I mean, those are executable things that are going on that they're going to see.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you get to that point, you're now walking the journey. You know, Mitch and I are kind of like that way.
Well, there's a lot of, I mean, these days it's very difficult because there's so many different touch points, and it's hard to know, you know, what's going to get attributed to that person making a decision. So you got to be on point all the time. You know, in the past there were a few channels. You didn't have to be quite as strategic. You didn't have to be as diverse. I mean, these days a single marketer can't really be knowledgeable of more than a couple channels because there's just so much change and intricacy, even if you just dive into social media alone. But you add Google ads, and that's its own universe. You got, you know, Facebook advertising, that's its own universe. And so it just becomes very difficult to always be on point, but it's critical. I mean, if you're telling a different story, if you're giving a different experience here or there, you're going to lose that customer ultimately.
Right. Yeah. And I bring up, like, the reason I bring up like two guides between Gandalf and Gollum is because both groups have a destination to get to. One group has a slightly easier time than the other, but only one group is led by somebody that has probably, well, we know from, if you've seen the movies, spoiler, not good intentions for the behalf of the heroes, of the, you know, in their journey. He's literally leading them to be food for this giant spider because he owes that spider them as food, because that spider, that's how it lived in the mountains, and you know, it's basically what it ate. I don't know. We're not going to go too deep into the lore, but that's kind of what that was for. Where Gandalf is like, we got to get to there. We got to get to this. We got to do that.
Yeah, if we're going to accomplish our goal, we have to go this way.
Yeah, and you know, you just because of the way the character of Gandalf was set up, you trust him. He's the sage. He's the wise. I don't want to say the wise guy because it's like, hey, no, not that kind of wise guy. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's like he's the one you're going to trust and look toward for direction.
He's the elder statesman, as Mitch's phrase.
Yeah. I mean, because, you have, but like I said, you kind of see where this is. It's like they both get to their destination ultimately in the end. You can make that argument. Well, yeah, the ring went into Mordor. Yeah, but, geez. I mean, Frodo nearly died.
Yeah, both sides had some close calls, but I think the Gollum side had quite a few more.
Yeah,
it was much more of a chaotic journey.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Mitch. It was a very chaotic journey. They were led through fields of past wars, but this wasn't the best path, Whereas if Gandalf made that decision to go to a rough path, it was kind of like, well, we got it because that way we're going to probably die.
The other way's rougher.
Yeah. So there's this idea in the journey, like, who do you want? Even though you're the hero, got to be careful who you're following.
Right.
For help, who's helping guide you to your destination.
Yeah. So, because there's this old saying, I love it. It's like every good intention will get to a destination. Every decision leads to a destination. So you can have the best intentions in the world. You're still going to end up somewhere. But if you have every intention of going to Florida and you get on 65 and you drive north, you're not going to go to Florida. So your intentions don't really matter. But in this case, I mean, it kind of does in a way, for what we're trying to accomplish. I mean, for what we do. I mean, it's about the customer and their success. So, who would you trust? Designing for a brand is not just design. It requires strategic thought. So we've talked before on a previous episode about like how it's not just a website. It's actually just, there's got to be a plan. Where you're going to use it for, how it's going to work, who you're talking to. It's not just a thing you're buying.
How does it fit with all of the other elements you have
right
in the universe that are espousing your brand?
Yeah. So when you're trying to apply a strategy, when you get to the point when you're working with John, for example, and you get to the tactics and everything's executed, that's only going to be as good as who Gandalf is and sitting in that seat of the strategy and laying out like, well, we should do this. I mean, you have to have somebody that's kind of sensitive to what's going on in culture, what's going on like for the goals that are there. Like you brought up, John, actually you've done this before. Because John, sometimes you're just like, hey, John, when you're like, well, maybe we should do that. Like for a gym, like, you know what, January, February, everybody's like, I'm going to lose weight. And you're like, you really need to do A, B, C, D.
Yeah. Kind of like, here's a North Star.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's important. That's what a lot of companies struggle with, especially as, if you can't retain leadership for whatever reason, you lose your North Star in marketing. Well, you got to start fresh. You got to start over. Somebody else comes in and nobody can replicate the previous person's vision. So it's just, it's a constant. On one hand, you have to constantly be rebirthing. You constantly have to be fresh and novel. On the other hand, you can't, let go of that customer's hand, which is that's the delicate balance, and it's a tough one to pull off for sure.
Yeah, and that's kind of what happens when you're, Mitch, as you call it, widgets, and you're selling them.
Right.
It sets up that, okay, here's the thing. Bye.
All right. Right. I mean, if you're a company, you're a business, you're a product, you're a service. Yeah, you need someone internally who embodies the vision of where that brand wants to go. But that's the value an agency also serves, is as that outside observer who sees you objectively, who, you internally, you think you see where you're going and where you are. But an agency as a whole, not just a marketing director or a graphic designer or a creative director, an agency is that Gandalf that can look at you objectively, see you the way the world outside sees you, and says, no, this is where you are now. This is where you want to go. We see that whole landscape. So we're better equipped, I believe, to help you get there than if you try to do all of those things from the inside.
Yeah.
Because you've got other things that are vying for your time and attention within your company, other things you have to get done.
Yeah.
Besides determining the marketing direction of your company, the promotional aspects of your company. You've got payroll, you got to make the things.
Yeah.
And Jason, what you're saying, the difference I think between, say, us as NerdBrand versus maybe some other branding, marketing, advertising agencies, they've commoditized the services they sell.
Yep.
So they want to sell you this thing. Here, they want to sell you something in a box.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Social media in a box. Google AdWords in a box.
Yeah.
Print advertising in a box.
Yeah, those things.
Collateral material in a box.
Yeah, they're not silos.
Right. All of those things have to play in the same world together to tell a consistent brand message. The value we bring to the table is we see all of those things. We understand the value of each of those implements, but we choreograph them so they all work together to sing a consistent song, basically, and speak in a consistent way to your audience in a way that they understand, so that in their journey of discovery, they become the hero and they feel like they've latched onto something of value, and that's what makes them a hero. And then that makes them advocates for your brand, and they're telling other people. So other people are discovering what's cool about you, about your brand, your product, your service.
Yeah, I like how you said sing the same song, because that's actually a theme in Lord of the Rings on how their Middle Earth was made. You know, you have Ainur, I guess is his name, the god, who's singing with the Valor, and then you have Malcor coming in and singing a different song, corrupting it. And so, you know, it kind of made me think of that. That's just a nerdy thing. You can extrapolate from that.
I believe
Yeah, you can extrapolate from that, whatever nerd analogy you want or brand analogy you want out of that. But,
Yeah,
you know, that kind of goes into what you're saying.
There's discord and there's harmony.
Yeah, and you're trying to, you know, what we do is we try to bring harmony to that discord that's occurring.
That's right.
So, see how we do that? It's actually, we do.
See how that worked?
We actually do a pretty good job when we're running on fumes.
Well, I think there's, you know, the cost side of an agency too. Most businesses can't afford to bring in the specialists that an agency typically has. Like, it doesn't make sense for most businesses to have you, Mitch, as a creative director sitting there full time.
Right.
But they need that person. And similarly, you know, a digital marketing specialist. Well, you might justify that, but a lot of small companies couldn't justify that. But what an agency can do is spread those costs around to multiple clients in a way that an individual business can't.
Yeah.
So then you get this, because in order to do the things that you said, to orchestrate the different channels and the different things out there in the world that you know, become marketing and become the identity of the company,
right,
you have to deeply understand where you're putting the stuff.
Well, and you have to devote the time and the energy.
Mm-hmm.
And are you going to hire a whole battery of people to devote tons of time and energy to that? I mean, you're trying to make payroll again, and you're trying to afford the raw materials to make whatever it is that your company produces. So, do you really need that added expense?
For the cost of one full-time employee internal, you could probably have a web developer, a creative director, a digital marketing person, you know, who, and all these other web designer and all these other things.
Thank you for making those separate.
Well, you're welcome.
Well, and they make that their 8-hour-a-day job to concentrate on those things. Generally, what happens inside a company is if you put a hat on somebody, okay, you're in sales, but I'm also going to make you our digital manager.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you've just basically given one person at least 2 jobs.
Yeah.
How efficiently and how effectively can they do either?
Oh, they'll never sleep.
They're not going to be a Gandalf. You know?
Yeah.
Right.
Let's just bring it back.
No, they're going to be, exactly. That's where I was going. Be a Gollum.
Go ahead. Yeah, you know, I mean.
Did you call him Gollum?
No, I said they will be a Gollum.
He calls me that all the time behind closed doors.
Yeah. I hear John. He calls me up on
our
the phone.
board meetings, he's always being mean to me.
John's always clearing his throat before he actually says what he wants to say to me, because it always starts off like, my precious.
Oh, God, here we go.
I knew it was going there. I knew it was going there.
Good luck cleaning that one up.
Yeah, Robert in the booth is like shaking his head no. I hit the limit. Anyway.
I was just saying that, you know, everybody, because you need those specialists, they become kind of the Gandalf of their particular skill set or whatever it may be, their craft, you know, and that's what creates good work. And then when those people understand how to work with each other and collaborate with a client, you end up with something that's uniform, is effective, works for the customer, and you get a good brand.
I was Gollum for probably about 3 years at a place where, I swear to God, the first week I was doing what John, I know it's funny, but because John and I have this.
Everyone there was a Gollum.
Yeah, John and I have history that is there. Even though I know Mitch, you and I have a different experience at with history with that.
But not really dissimilar in some ways.
And it really wasn't. That's why you and I were like, we've seen this story.
I've heard this song before.
Yeah. But it's always like the first week I was the web guy. The next week I was social. The next week I was, marketing. And then the next week I was SEO. By the time I got back to the next week after that, it was the next month, really, because 4 weeks in a month. All that SEO
Nothing
work.
got done.
Yeah, nothing got done. Everything I did in SEO did not matter by the fourth week of the following month because I had to start all over, basically. Because Google's always, as we've said before, Google's like a child. We're the adult. We have to teach it. I couldn't get to teach the child consistently the topic that I wanted it to learn. And I had to be like, well, you learned your lesson this week. I'll see you in 3 weeks. And, everybody would just be like, but I have questions.
Yep.
And so I couldn't do the job effectively. And I knew I was doing a disservice to everything. So I just started having to drop stuff because, you can't.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you do social media, you're thinking like, yeah, you're just writing a social post and posting this and that. And I'm like, posting what? What are you writing? What imagery? What artwork? Somebody has to sit with Photoshop open or whatever tool you want. Make a thing before you post a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that gets forgotten. And that takes a long time.
And it takes much, much more time if there's not a clear message,
A plan.
strategy.
Well, a
if there's
plan,
not
yeah.
words that you're supposed to use,
Yeah, I'm kind of slapping on the wall that whole spray and pray.
It just becomes make something to fill that slot,
Mm-hmm.
and that's
Yeah.
all you're doing.
It's
Yeah.
the same with everything else. And
Yeah.
I think that's the difference between a kind of a blossoming company getting it right and building a strong brand. They actually take the time to pause, sit down with someone from the outside who can give them an honest opinion and understands the different places that all the things have to play and go, and then put together something cohesive and something comprehensive and something that, feels right to the customer.
Yeah, because it's pick your items to design in the strategic phase. What are we going to make? Like Mitch, you've been like over the last few episodes very insightful about logo. I'll use this construction because
Okay.
it's really more appropriate than saying design because you're thinking.
Architecture.
Yeah, I think that way with websites. It's the construction. That's my engineering background going like, I'm thinking about the end result, but I'm also putting together and tying together all the I do it with business networking. I tie all these pieces together and I go, this one works here, this one works here, and this one works here. On video, I'm doing a really cool analogy, but if you're on audio, you're just not going to get this. I hope you got a shot of this, Robert. Look at what I'm doing. I'm cool. Yeah, see, you got a thumbs up. I'm doing good on this episode. But
To your point,
It's the same with a brand. There's
Yeah.
brand architecture.
Mhm.
It's and you're constructing something, and it's intentional, and it's kind of reverse engineered.
you got to think about it.
I say this in introductions with new clients. It's like we're not just making pretty things that occupy a space and are attractive. Okay, that's easy. Pretty is easy. Smart is hard. We say that all the time. We build machines to do a job effectively, but each of those different machines, whether it's in social media, advertising, branding, they all link together because the momentum that each of those machines creates is propelling the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the value. That's you're getting so much more inertia because somebody has plotted out not just how to build this mechanism, but how does that mechanism now fit with the next one? How does that social media work with branding? And how does that branding work with advertising? And how do we capitalize on the energy those things create that it effectively reaches the destination, which is the consumer mind, that it needs
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
to reach?
Yeah. And being nerds, we know one major brand that has done that very well and still continues, and that's the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It was
Consistent product, thought out roadmap,
mm-hmm,
a consistency in crafting the stories,
mm-hmm.
a consistent product, quality of product that's put out each time,
Characters.
generally speaking.
It's gotten better too. It didn't really start out like that way. Of course, a lot of that had to do with 2008. The technology then was not the same as it is in 2020.
Well, the whole methodology of how they went about doing the work. They went from parceling out different pieces, different studios, and letting them do their thing. It's like, no, we've got our internal studio. We now have a studio. Let's craft this studio that tells these distributors, that gives these distributors material to distribute,
Mm-hmm.
so that it's thought out, that each movie links well with the next project,
the vision.
which links with the next product.
Yeah, you got to have the vision. Like when you hand something to a creator, if I was to give John, an account, and I said, "Here, go market them," he's gonna look at me and go like, "What's wrong?"
We can do stuff.
Yeah,
Trust me.
We can do things.
I'll push a button somewhere. That's about your response to me, after the giant eye roll you'll give me. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like with you and Laura. If I tell Laura, here's a pamphlet, make a website, she's gonna be like, "Are you high?"
What's wrong with you?
So it's sort of like you got to have a thought process. You're that way with the brand and with the with logos, the standards, and everything else. You're kind of like, but what is it gonna say?
Right.
Well, it's very important. We just sat with the prospect the other day. They said, "This is going on 9,000 shirts."
Yeah.
We better get the logo right.
Yeah,
It better be designed in a way that it works on shirts and everywhere else.
Yeah, or just have a standardized version for that medium.
Mm-hmm.
I've had that conversation with signage. Like vinyl signage is like, I wouldn't want to do it for a living. It's more like a thing that, I don't know, maybe it mentally soothed me for anxiety, but I know someone that brought in like this big giant cut of vinyl, and it was a sign, it had letters, and you got to spend time meticulously peeling these off. And sometimes you peel off the letters, and sometimes you peel off the space that's around the letters because it's going to go on a door. Mm-hmm. Mitch, you're looking at me like, really?
I'm listening.
Okay, you're looking at me like, what
No.
are you doing? Okay, so anyways, but what can happen is like if the fonts are really thin or if the graphics are really thin, as soon as you put it on the glass door and the installer peels it off, it peels right off with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's practical aspects to, not just logos, but anything we craft or design. But especially with your visual identity, we have to make sure that whatever space it occupies, whatever platform it's applied to, whatever medium it's used in, number one, does it function practically? Does it work for reasons you just mentioned? But can it be adapted for virtually any space it needs to occupy?
And sometimes it can't. Sometimes there is instances where I believe that it can't exactly, but if you're working off guidelines and with somebody like Mitch, there's tweaks that can be approved to be added to the guide that now are standard because of it. Because at some point, everybody's got a different eye for things, and they're going to like take some liberties. Mitch hates drop shadows. We know that on
logos.
Yeah, we know he loves. Yeah, and our
it's kind of a 90s thing.
Yeah, but to the credit of our engineer in the studio, Mr. Robert, thank you, sir, was like, I got to have something because it's going video. So they kind of collaborated together, and Mitch was like, well, doing it that way, that's okay. And then now that became a part of our standards.
Well, yeah, but generally speaking, that's built into the standards. There are occasions.
Yeah, you put logo placement in there. I remember that.
Yeah, there is occasionally things that arise that you maybe didn't necessarily plan for, but 99% of the time, you can, in a good set of standards, you can accommodate most applications.
Yeah. I saw a standards the other day for an RFP for water district, and it had about 80 pages. And I was like, I don't care, I'll bid on it, but it didn't have a budget range. So I said, no, John and Mitch will hate me. So I was like, not going to do that. But I could probably pretty much guess after talking and mentioning it with you earlier, like we know how long that would take and we'd have to make a hire. There's all these things that would happen. But then after it was done, then what? So that's all business stuff that's later. But it's like at the end of the day, I'm like, I have to act as a Gandalf in that situation and not the Gollum and go like, make a document, Mitch. I can't just do that. I have to kind of look at like the project. Because when I told you 80 pages, you were like, well, that's a year.
Well, no, seriously. It all depends on the size of brand standards. How long does that take? Well, how big's your business?
Uh-huh.
How many people do you employ? What's the size of your customer base? How many different things do you make? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of questions going there before it can be answered. It will take X amount of time. But generally speaking, the smaller the business, generally the less time it would take to create a brand standard versus I used to do work with Humana. Their brand standards was a binder.
Yeah, I would believe it.
No, really. It was sometimes two binders because one applied to one thing one set of standards applied to something else.
Mm-hmm.
The bigger a brand and the broader its reach, and the more places it occupies, the more other intangible things that might be attached to it, the bigger it's going to be. The more thought has to be put into it, and the longer it takes to put it together, because you've got to think of more. There's more things to think about,
right?
Basically.
Well, there's that, and there's also you don't want to change too many core things that are out there in the world. So
right.
You have to go reprint everything.
Unless it's just a complete rebrand.
Right.
Yeah, you're gonna.
Which it rarely. That's why you end up, I think, with these volumes of thing, because it's just a little tweak. We're gonna do it this way. It's close enough to the original brand. It works.
You can carry some things over, which helps. If you're a fresh brand, though, if you're starting from ground zero, if you're a big business starting from ground zero, you can still do a voluminous brand standard if you need it. But most startups don't start that way. They're not that big, so you don't have, one of those big family Bible size things that a lot of big corporations have.
The brand Bible, which is actually, I've heard
it's
that
a thing.
before.
Yeah, it's a thing.
That's a thing.
You can start small. You can start basic. A modest brand standards that basically just gives people instruction on these are our colors, these are our fonts, these are the different logo formats, these are the things you don't do with the logo, and here's how the colors break down for the different mediums.
Yeah, doing what we do, building brand identities, everything, like, it's expensive and it takes a lot of time. But
expensive. I mean,
people think logo though. That's all they think. They think branding. Right. Oh, you're just making a logo.
I need a logo.
Oh, no, we're not. Like you just said, how many T-shirts did you just say?
9,000.
So imagine I'm going to make a tweak, and then somebody has already had those T-shirts made. Who's going to be mad? Who's going to get fired?
Now, you may just need a logo, but how many different places is that logo going to go, and how many different mediums is it going to exist in?
Right.
I had a project this is a long time ago, and it was a country club, and I like them. They're cool. Country clubs are cool to work on, but they have a lot of materials like that. So the logo wasn't great. It was old. I was trying to get them into understanding this, that you came to me for a website, but your logo colors, it doesn't work. And it's barely recognizable or legible on anything, but they had a pool, and I was like, towels everywhere had it embroidered, and I'm like, started looking at all the stuff they had. They had even vinyl on chairs and stuff, and I was like, this is going to be thousands and thousands of dollars for them to invest in. Because on our side, we'd have to create standards for those mediums and say, like, all right, you want to put it on a chair? This is what kind of chair? Where does it go? What brand? There's like that kind of detail of thought that can go into, because it's a country club. Because they're not playing around. They're not hosting like people like me at country clubs. They're multi-millionaires. I mean, so you kind of want to have a classy, upscale thought about what you're putting this thing on and what they're interacting with.
Yeah, it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle when you're when you're in that position, and that's why a rebrand needs to be really thought about very long and hard before you step into that, because okay, we've got all this stuff out in the universe. If we're going to change the way we look.
Yeah, that's the easy part.
Yeah, that's easy. What are we going to do about all those things that exist out there in the world that we need to replace? I mean,
And how do you explain all that to people?
Right.
When they come back around and they see things changed. We go back to this doesn't feel like the thing I used to have.
Right.
I need to
like
analyze it a little bit, or I need to be maybe critical of it.
And the things that run through people's mind. Why did you change? Do the same people not operate this place? Is this not the same owner? Do you not make the same things? Is the quality going to be as good? I mean, you don't want to raise those questions in people's minds if you don't have to. But if you're going to make change, like John says, you've got to have a package to come along behind it and say, this is a great thing, and this is going to be great for you, and here's why. And then you still maintain that kind of hero mentality within your customers, like, oh, it's okay. This is a good thing. Right. Not only am I loyal to this brand is improving, so I'm going to be really smart if I stick with them.
Yeah, I mean, our job is like, they kind of know that they need the shirts and the towels and the things. I mean, some people we've encountered, they bring up the whole, we got this on 9,000 T-shirts. Like, gives us a base, graphics, can be cost effective to make, but one example is they may be cost effective to make, but completely useless in regards to postal regulations.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
And that's a whole other thing that gets kind of missed as well. Like, you had to really, like, I really liked what you said in a previous episode, Mitch, about when we were we looked at Pfizer's logo, and I completely didn't read the thing underneath it that said, oh, yeah, it is after DNA. But you made a good point about how it's made and its construction drives your eye away. It literally tracks away.
That was just one guy's opinion. It
Yeah,
just seemed like that the one arc of it took your eye away from the logo.
Yeah. But
which you don't necessarily want.
But not all designers have. That's like, where did you learn that? At what point in your career did things like that become like enlightened to you?
That's kind of funny. I mean, I had the benefit of my last 2 years of high school, taking what was called commercial art my senior year of high school for 3 periods, junior and senior year. So I had a really good foundation of what commercial art, or what we would call advertising and marketing design, was all about, versus just sitting with your sketch pad and drawing pretty pictures or painting pretty paintings. You're creating something.
It's utility.
Right. You're creating something you're creating material that's in service to the brand, to make the brand, help the brand work. So I had a good foundation there. Some things are just, some people say, well, I got 10 years of college and a master's degree, and that's why I know that. Some of these things are just instinctive.
Yeah. It's intuitive.
Right.
Well, and I mean, it extends farther too. I know in landing pages back in the day, it was kind of like pick a photo where the person's looking at the form or looking at the call to action, which is still kind of relevant.
Right.
Still pretty relevant. But
that goes in print ads too. Like if you see a print ad and the model is like looking straight on and she's off to the side and here's the perfume bottle, you're looking at her.
Right.
But if she's kind of like doing this, looking at the perfume bottle, now you're looking at you're kind of like, she's pretty. What is she looking at?
You generally want things leading you into the subject rather than away from it. What's interesting though is one of my final instructors in college was a guy named Jack Smalley, who was a president of a local agency. And I love Jack to death. God rest his soul. He's the one who told me, go out and get a job. And I did. But he was quizzing me over a layout I was working on, something. Well, what's it? I said, well, I'm trying to lead their eye. And he said, if you have to lead their eye, you've already lost them. So while all these things are valuable.
Is he actually Yoda?
Kinda. You must.
Kinda.
Come on, man. I can't have any fun.
Kinda. I mean, someday I'd like to either collaborate with someone to write a book on some of the personalities in the Louisville ad business. There were some really giant minds in the local business that I had the benefit of learning from. But it was just interesting because there are these rules, okay? But there's exceptions. There can be exceptions. It's all about what is the most powerful element on that page graphic that's going to grab somebody and make them pay attention. That's the first thing. But this all goes back to what we're talking about, the hero, having a Gandalf or a difference between having a Gandalf or a Gollum is an agency is a Gandalf. We know all these things. We've done this before.
Right.
We've done this for a lot of other people. And there's very few hurdles we have not encountered ourselves that you will probably encounter. All these things already come natural to us so that businesses don't have to spend the time and energy. Because I guarantee you there's people going to be listening to this podcast going, you know what? I never thought of that. That never occurred to me before.
Yeah.
Well, you're hiring problem solvers because stuff changes. The platforms change. You look the past 10 years. I mean, the stuff that you used to do and know is some of it's not nearly as relevant as it is now.
Yeah.
You've had to learn new things, and
Software.
we are, agencies are in an environment where we're constantly doing that and trying to learn from each other in a way that businesses, they do, but not quite.
Well,
it's not quite as core.
Especially in such a data-driven environment. There's a cliche, I guess. It's also, everything's so data-centric now, and somebody's got to be watching this information come in as it happens.
Yeah,
and I challenge any business, big or small, to tell me they can have enough eyes paying enough attention to help set proper direction and course correction on a minute-by-minute basis. And is that cost effective? Does that make sense?
You have to be very careful about the data-driven thing. In sales, for example, Robert, you probably like this. In sales, I brought Coral in to help with that. I didn't hire a archivist or historian. I needed help with outreach. So don't do that to salespeople. Don't make them put the data in. Gandalf never said to the fellowship, well, I think the data says, that's not how that went. It was just like, you just got to get this done or this guy's going to kill everybody. Sometimes it's like you said in the previous episode, sometimes the thing's the thing, but the data is useful for, in your world, John, after. Mm-hmm. But if you try to make it the thing before, I think you've created yourself a barrier and a stumbling block to accomplish what you want to do. You've kind of taken out that freedom of, like you said, I think what you said earlier was there's things that are firm and solid, and then there's things that could be like a sponge. So there's principles that are in design like brick that you follow. But then there's this is a spongy area where it's like you need because
some things
creativity.
Some things are, that's where creativity comes in.
But data doesn't really do that. Data screams brick.
but data by itself, but you've got someone like Jonathan who knows how to access that data and knows how to interpret that data. And it helps you set your course. It's not the only thing.
Don't beat the table up. He will come out of the booth and come after you.
You know how often I bop my nose with this microphone?
I've been watching a couple times. It was really funny the one time when you ran into it, like we were driving a car and we had suddenly stopped.
But I mean, it's just another one of those elements that we can have eyes on a minute-to-minute basis that doesn't make sense for a lot of businesses to have somebody sit in that seat and do that. You've got other things that got to be done. You got to make the donuts. You know what I mean?
It's just a flat out cost thing to me. It's like, we can invest in a tool that heat maps and scroll maps your website because we're going to put it on 6 websites and justify that monthly subscription, where a single business, it doesn't make sense for them usually to do that.
Yeah.
So then they run on intuition.
I prefer to do that. Because for years when doing websites before that was a thing, I mean, that's what you had to rely on was intuition. You would talk to the business owner. You would talk to just anybody that you could to kind of understand like the project.
What pages are important. I don't need anybody's opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, you can pull an analytics report and kind of determine what. There's always a saying in web with "Don't make your users angry," and that typically happens when you try to like put something in front of them they don't care about. And so visual data was a really good way of like showing, like we said before. Oh, that thing we obsessed over in the boardroom, nobody cares of. Yeah, let's move on.
The old competing.
Yeah.
Competing. Everybody's got their favorite thing.
Yeah.
And especially when you look internally in companies, and everybody's got their pet thing.
Yeah.
And they're all competing with another, vying with each other for attention. I think externally it's easier. That becomes less of an issue because we're looking to solve this problem. And once this problem is solved, that then helps solve the next problem.
Right.
Whereas internally, it's like, it's just a turf war.
Yeah. But the visual data allows you to kind of have a conversation to say, like, this is actually what's happening. It's not us coming in there with our view and saying, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. Mm-hmm. Do you want us to continue to help you fix it? Because somebody says to me, hey, I'm designing a website. All right, great. Can you put this script on there so I can see what's going on? Can you send me an analytics report? If I don't get those things, if I can't do those things, I kind of don't want to do it.
Thank you.
Because I'm going to get yelled. I'm going to get yelled at later. Mm-hmm. They're going to be like, "Well, I paid you all that money, and then here 6 months later, we're back where we were."
Nothing happens because you're just throwing darts at a wall and hoping to get a bullseye.
Right. Going back to the topic, and going back to what I said earlier about what Jack told me about, if you feel like you have to lead somebody somewhere, you've already lost them.
Yeah.
Another aspect of what goes into what we do is it's not just about pretty things and pictures. It's words. What you say is the number one most important thing, because what you say is what you build everything else around. Mm-hmm. So it's another layer in this onion that we can give the attention to that clients really can't. They don't have the time and resources to do that. It's
the whole point of hiring an agency anyways, because you don't have the time and the resources.
Right. Yeah.
It's like hiring a lawyer and being like, no, I got the brief. It's fine.
well, it's in this age, and we talked about it in between podcasts. In this age where everything is so kind of at your fingertips, you can make things so easily yourself. This kind of do-it-yourself world we live in.
That's the Gollum route. Is
Right.
going to Fiverr and going to Upwork and getting this person over here for $200 a blog post and getting this person over here to do your logo.
Do a $75 logo.
And hopefully it all comes together, and it won't.
Yeah, we know
because it wasn't thought about as one element rather than just simple fill in the blank things.
Yeah.
I need.
We actually
blanks
see
I need
that
to
quite a
fill in.
bit. We've had people. I mean, people because the nature of our agency. I mean, I have this product, great, but then they've got their cousin, nephew, Bob, some guy named Kevin.
My little brother can build websites.
Doing all these
social
and then I heard one time I was like, well, I think I'm spending this on marketing, and I was like, oh God, wait, what? You think?
Yeah, we got somebody in billing running on our social media.
Yeah, and it's terrifying, and you're like, kind of just sitting there going like, well, this is why things are broke. You have too many things going everywhere.
I mean, it's nice that in one aspect, it's nice that a lot of businesses care because they know they need to address those things. But it's the difference between addressing them as individual needs rather than a single organic mechanism that needs to be managed, fed, and cared for.
Yeah, and it's not like, we're not saying in a way that it's like, well, it's on fire, give up all hope, abandon ship.
Well,
no, you're just kind of, if you're kind of at that stage and you're seeing that, okay, now it's time to pause, like John said. It's time to pause for a minute.
Breathe.
Take a breath.
Yeah, take a breath and take a look at the landscape and, strategize, recalculate with what you got. And some people, positions may change because it's just what has to happen,
And it may not be us you need to talk to. I mean, depending on where you're listening. I mean, we'll talk to anybody. It doesn't matter where you are in the United States.
Right.
Geography doesn't matter.
We have, actually, too.
Right. So, but you need to find someone that you can trust, that you can discuss these problems with, who understands where you are because they've seen other people there too, if they haven't been there themselves, and has a track record of making it work.
Potatoes. That's all I have in my head right now ringing. I know that's going to take things off, but keep going. Because it's like Lord of the
you
Rings.
just need problem solvers. You need people with expertise in certain channels. It's not like they're going to walk in the room. An agency's going to walk in the room and just know the answer to everything. Ever.
No,
they've got the minds on the team. Hopefully, if you've got the right group, to look at this new opportunity or look at this new channel and take the old skills that and evolve those into this new channel. I mean, nobody knew how to use TikTok a year ago. No
right?
brand,
Yeah.
no brand,
and they're still learning.
and most brands still don't have a clue.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that we do. We're probably not the people to go to if that's your core focus. But we could figure it out, given enough resources and time, and we could do creative for you in a way that works.
That's the thing. You need you have the problem. Sometimes they're new like that. We need the time to get our heads around it, get our hands around it, and we'll figure it out. And if we can't, we'll tell you.
And time to experiment.
Right.
I mean, again, most brands that are on there right now who seem to have their crap together, they're just learning. They're taking in data, they're running different ads, and they're seeing what works. And
what's interesting is what you said. You mentioned TikTok as an example. A company might say, "I've got I have a Facebook problem." Well, chances are, if you've got a Facebook problem, that's just a signal that there's a larger marketing and branding problem.
Yeah,
an advertising problem.
Your message is weak. Your creative's not up to par.
You're not talking to the right
You're not
people.
being consistent.
Yeah. I mean, people still get stumbling. They still stumble over like what you talk about, brand message. To you, it's like breathing, but you talk about it to other people. Like they don't think about copy. And even when you say copy, I've had people stumble.
Yeah.
They're like, what do you mean copy? What's that mean?
You can start here. What are the 5 words you can use to tell people what you do, why you do it, and why that's good for them?
Yeah.
They don't. 9 times out of 10, they don't.
Yeah. Well, and then I always like to give a plug for Dana Hara. She'll ask a question like, if your company was a superhero, who would it be? And it's like, would you quit like hitting the mic? And it's like, I'm sorry if I'm pumping the brakes too hard there.
your thought.
Anywho, yeah, it's like, yeah, if it was a superhero, who would it be? Because that's the brand's. You know, you can start there to start thinking about your DNA or whatever
like
fancy word.
Yeah, a famous person. Who should you sound like? I know I've brought up the example many times. Old Forester latched on to Mark Twain. You know, witty, not sarcastic, but witty humor, short statements. You know, intelligent, sophisticated.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, I mean, even coming up with that persona shouldn't really happen in a vacuum either. Because what's interesting is one business may say, well, I think we're this person. But then when we go in and you really look at what they make, what they create, what they're about, that persona doesn't speak to the audience they should be speaking to.
I'm hearing that a lot lately with the word persona keeps coming up again.
It's a thing.
I know it's a thing and it's legitimate, but my goodness, it keeps coming up a lot. And to me, again, I don't know. But,
like authentic.
Yeah. Well, I don't hear that one as much.
You need an authentic persona.
Yeah, I need an authentic persona. Yeah, that would be
10 points.
Do what?
10 points to John.
What do we do though?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's always the thing when I hear it. It's like, what do I do then to make that? Like, there's always that insightful saying, like, yeah, but it's like, here, make a persona. The other day, somebody said that as advice, and it was good advice. And I mean, it's for real. I'm not picking on it or being facetious. It's just like, but I don't know how to go past that statement. And that's kind of what I was referring to with brand image or brand messaging. Like, that sounds cool. And then you said, well, it's the copy. Well, what's copy? You know, sometimes you kind of have to really, really, really get down to the ground to help understand it. Like, it's just,
no, there can be a vocabulary hurdle, kind of a jargon hurdle.
Yeah, which we did. We played one of those for the New Year's show.
Yeah.
The jargon game.
Yeah.
So, you know, that marketing jargon, I mean, there's so much of it out there. It's misunderstood, misquoted, and sometimes it just makes us go, ugh.
Just speak English.
Anyways, we appreciate everybody listening to this episode of the podcast. We hope that you pick a Gandalf. If it's not necessarily us, somebody, just be careful.
We'd like it to be us.
Yeah, we'd love it to be us. Absolutely. We know we have partnerships with other companies and places that, to what John said earlier, it's like, you know, if we don't have that resource internally, we're going to find that person because we trust them. We have a little nerd work. You know?
Because we know how it all works together.
Yeah, that, and it's kind of funny to say nerd work because network, nerd work. But anyways. Anyways, check us out on all the social media channels at NerdBrand Agency. And you can check out this podcast at nerdbrandagency.com/podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and Mitch is still watching those comments.
Please leave a comment. Please leave constructive criticism, topics you'd like us to discuss.
You sound so sad.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, I'm imploring. I'm imploring the audience to leave some feedback and maybe some topics that we have on some things maybe we haven't covered you'd like to hear us talk about. That's what the comment section's for.
Yeah. Sometimes I use it for that. Sometimes it's something else.
We don't care about those.
Yeah. Anyways, other thing to add to YouTube, just for those listeners, I mean, just to maybe encouragement. Maybe there's a timestamp. Maybe there's something. If you copy that timestamp, put it in the comments.
Yeah.
Mention that. You can help your fellow YouTubers like skip to the important stuff and past all the stupid things that Jason says. It's really, yeah, it's really useful. Anyways, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week. Tune in and keep your nerd brand strong.